At its deepest level, the 144,000 represents a polymerase chain reaction occurring within our DNA that amplifies it and synthesizes it into the light body. When you encounter 144, you're experiencing an awakening at cellular level. This number first entered collective consciousness through the Bible, specifically Revelations, where prophecy foretells that 144,000 sealed members of 12 tribes of Israel would be protected by God. Within this 144,000 supposedly saved from rapture, redeemed from earth, some religious groups interpret them as recently converted Christians protected from divine wrath during end times. To be sealed means claimed as one's property, indicating ownership. In this framework, the 144,000 in Revelations are God's servants bringing sinners to Jesus Christ during the 7-year tribulation period. Other religious groups interpret the 144,000 as symbolic, representing all Christians since numbers in apocalyptic literature were meant to be read symbolically. In this respect, 12 squared then multiplied by 1,000 to create 144,000 symbolically refers to all Christians. Modern spiritual thought has reached deeper into esoteric roots where 144,000 isn't a literal number of sealed people but simply refers to all who have attained unity consciousness. So what is the 144,000 then? This number carries profound significance to spirituality and awakening because its true power and context isn't found inside religious form nor newly spiritual form. The 144,000 directly references the fact that our universe is a mirrored universe. In this mirrored universe, we witness our own awakening. Therefore, an ascended being entering into or already operating in enlightenment state would see this reflected in the mirrored universe by all extensions and forms of this reality, starting with our genome, starting with our DNA. When we encounter a concept highly significant to our awakening such as seeing number 144 or this concept known as 144,000, it's not actually referring to 144,000 literal people who will be saved or volunteer. Instead, 144,000 is something mirrored to us as we awaken and enlighten on all levels of this reality. The first level starts at the physiological level. So the first layer of 144,000 is found within our own temple, within our own body. Once we start going through awakening, we begin seeing all subtle energy channels within our body and all meridians feeding into major energy centers start going through transformation. This transformation produces a cascade effect similar to proliferation or polymerase chain reaction. The nadis are subtle energy channels that life force or prana travel through. They are rivers in our subtle body where life force flows, energy in motion. When our consciousness awakens, our frequency begins rising. It's not just mental awakening happening separate from body and spirit. It's the actual frequency of our whole energy field raising its hertz. Imagine how much more prana or life force our subtle body would start taking in and requiring to keep up with our frequency raising. Eventually, the life force streaming through subtle energy channels of the nadis makes its way to 3 primary nadis: Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna. The Sushumna is the central channel. Ida is the feminine channel, equated with the moon and left hemisphere of our subtle body. Pingala is the masculine channel, equated with the sun and right hemisphere of our subtle body. When Ida and Pingala awaken at the spine's base, they're meant to move in synergy up a spiral motion to the central channel of Sushumna until they unify at the third eye center, awakening the higher spiritual organs of perception. Once the 72,000 subtle energy channels have been brought into unity through these 3 primary channels, they multiply in their power from 72,000 to 144,000. And guess how many petals the third eye center is represented by? 144. And guess how many petals the crown center is represented by? 1,000. 1,000 times 144 is 144,000. This transformation is crucial because one significance of seeing 144 is there's an amplification. When you see 144, that's mirroring to you through the mirror of our universe. It's reflecting that you're going through awakening at cellular level, at the level of our mitochondria that powers our DNA. So 144 will now be seen as the amplification, the times 2, the amplification of our nadis, our subtle energy channels within the body which start to balance and rise and come into union. If you're discovering that spiritual awakening has measurable effects in your physical body and energy field and you want to explore more of these hidden connections between consciousness and biology, please subscribe. We're revealing what mainstream spirituality and science deliberately keep separate. Your support helps us continue bridging these worlds. Now let's go deeper into what this union creates. Therefore they double, and that's what we experience as the 144. That's when the 72 energy channels called nadis in the subtle body rise and come into union. So the other significance that 144 means, on top of being a number mirroring to us that we're going through an amplification process, an awakening, is also union. 144 and the 144,000 are both different ways of portraying the enlightenment occurring as a result of union of the hemispheres within our body. When the left and right hemispheres within our body come into their full capacity, they fully come online and then they reach union. Therefore, enlightenment produces the number 144, and that is then amplified into 144,000. At its very core, the 144,000 is a direct reference to the polymerase chain reaction happening within our DNA that amplifies it and synthesizes it, union, into the light body. 144,000 is an esoteric reference to the light body. And that's why it's pivotal that everyone going through awakening sees 144 constantly, because it's mirrored in our universe back to us what's happening at physiological level, at emotional and mental level, at spiritual level. That's why 144,000 is so multi-layered. It's referencing the light body before anything else. But it's showing you that on all scales of reality, because as above, so below. In fact, as above so below is way more relevant when it comes to our awakening than any other concept, because our awakening is the reason why a human being is here at this time in this collective on Earth. It is for our awakening. People going through awakening are having fewer seals placed over each aspect of their genome. And that unlocking of those seals that were once protecting and once coveted are now being seen for what they are. They're being seen for cutting us off from our divinity and from our light body. These seals now in this age, we don't want them. They're not protecting us. We're unlocking them. And when we've unlocked these seals placed over our genome, what happens is we have more access to more of our information, and it's becoming more organized. And when there's more organization and synthesis to more of our DNA, it's no longer this 2 double helix system. It becomes 12-stranded and then 14 strands. And 14 amplified is 144,000. If you think consciousness on its own can't access more of its own information, shift its own expression through its DNA and through its genetics, then you don't believe in evolution. Consciousness is what facilitates the entire evolutionary process. It's all about consciousness. Just look at a tomato. A tomato has more genes than we do. And the genetic expression of a tomato is highly unstable. It is so natural for consciousness to be able to evolve itself and unlock its seals and access more of its information that you would actually have to try to stop it. Now, what's most important to understand right off the bat is that the Book of Revelations was renamed. Its original name was the Apocalypsis. And the Apocalypsis, which now we know as the Apocalypse, means an unveiling and to reveal what is behind that veil. So what we're actually talking about now is something between us and a larger worldview. And that's truly what the Book of Revelations is based on from the esoteric perspective. The Book of Revelations was called that to change the whole narrative into something taking place externally in the exterior or exoteric sphere, when in reality the apocalyptic was meant to be between us and our larger higher self. So what the apocalypse or unveiling actually is isn't something of the end of times. It's just the end of times as we know it. Instead, it's when we are revealing to ourselves our true identity. And our true identity is oneness. Even what we'll find just by deconstructing the name Revelations is that there's a revealing. And this revealing is one taking place depending on the person's level of consciousness. If we're operating at a very baseline lower level of consciousness known as base consciousness, then we're going to be experiencing everything external because we have not created enough strength internally. And if we haven't done enough inner work internally, we can't build up into experiencing what's going to be revealed internally. So that energy will still go somewhere. It will just go completely outsourced and external to us. In which case, what we're experiencing is whatever is written for us. And that's what's really important to understand. Your level of consciousness will determine what is being revealed, what is being unveiled. The higher up in the level of consciousness we go, What we'll see is that what's being unveiled is any layers standing between us and our smaller egoic self in oneness or enlightenment. Sometimes we might think of enlightenment in this larger-than-life type of concept and put it way high up on a mountain peak. But that's just not the case. We've had enough lifetimes. We've had enough experiences and even mastery to build up into something within this age that can actually just come more as our natural essence, more like us coming home. And that's what's really being experienced with something like enlightenment or its other name, oneness. These different types of consciousness levels are determining exactly what level we experience the unveiling or the revelations at. And that's why there's a very strong and thoroughly robustly constructed narrative far before this age that was pointing in prophecy to this time period being the end of times. But it's the end of times looked at base level consciousness. Base level consciousness, the lowest level of consciousness, is also known in esoterica as 666 or the mark of the beast. What's important to understand about base level consciousness is that its dominant expression is through fear. You're the easiest controlled when you're operating in fear. But imagine now that fear is your dominant reality. Even at subconscious level, even if we don't think we're operating based off fear constantly, it's still going on subconsciously and it's showing and leaking through all our different actions and motives. We're almost at the deepest revelation, and if this is opening your understanding of how consciousness, DNA, and spiritual awakening are interconnected and you want to explore more of these esoteric truths, please subscribe. We're decoding what was deliberately hidden in plain sight. Your support helps us continue revealing these mysteries. Now for the final unveiling. Fear constructs and shapes our external reality in very real ways. They leak through our actions. Everything that takes place at lower level of consciousness like base consciousness isn't just fearful thoughts. They're everything that makes up the frequency of fear. But our frequency isn't just made up through our thoughts. Our frequency is built through our thoughts, emotions, actions, belief systems, and intentions. When you combine all 5 of those together, you create frequency. What frequency does is it's supposed to raise. And as it rises, there is a revelations that happens. As our frequency raises from beast consciousness into an unveiling, it gets revealed that we are God consciousness. And that is also what I'm calling oneness, but also what's known as unity consciousness, because it's not just saying that we are God alone. That would be the shadow side of oneness. Oneness means everything is God. That's why I'm calling it God consciousness. Once we enter God consciousness from the beast, that journey up raising our frequency is the revelations through that ascension upwards. That's the apocalypse. And that is the esoteric meaning of the Book of Revelations, also originally known as the Apocalypsis. The Book of Revelations reads like a vision quest through time. Its most overarching themes are of Judgment Day, a second coming, the mark of the beast, and a persistent battle between good and evil that takes place both inside and outside of time, suggesting this book is also referring to eternal themes. Like many other texts, this was intentionally manipulated to conceal truth about our human identity and position us in subordinate state to divine powers to continue promoting worship and religious programming. But when we look deeper into its meaning, the Book of Revelations can be experienced through its esoteric dimensions. The hyperdimensional spiritual battle taking place between good and evil are the lower and higher thought forms of service to all and service to self that are always present and always influencing us. The different animals inside this text have multiple meanings. The first layer is that animals are commonly used in spiritual text as symbols of nations. But the second layer is that animals represent different archetypes inside our consciousness. When we take on a specific pattern of acting and perceiving, it can be associated with an animal form holding that same energy. The 7 churches represent the 7 alchemical stages of transmutation of our light body as we ascend. The 4 horses represent events taking place before Judgment Day. But from esoteric perspective, they also represent the different auras our energy field can emanate from the different spiritual forces and influences we align ourselves with. The mark of the beast is our lower 3 energy centers when they are cut off from the higher energy centers. It is our earthly nature when it is fully bound to its material possessions, lust, greed, and separation consciousness. This separation is also known as fear. And that's why all mark of the beast prophecies are fear-based. You have to see how if we don't experience this text from its deeper dimensions, it can be telling us truths like there's a spiritual battle, but while also twisting the truth at the same time, it can be used by groups to control our perception of who we really are and prepare us for events by putting us into the very fear that will create those outcomes. My point isn't that fear is bad and that everything is fine. My point is far more nuanced than that. It's that the breakthroughs and outer transformation we will see are entirely dependent on the inner transmutation we have gone through. The moment we read this text as purely external, we have become trapped in programming and have not developed the spiritual sight for true awakening. This is also why judgment is a very strong theme inside the book of Revelations. It's because judgment is very core and important to this whole concept of coming into a larger revelation. Judgment means an awakening. It means a return. And a return of an awakening could sound like a second coming. What's returning or a second coming would be a level of remembrance or level of remembering, reawakening. It is to literally take your different members and put them together. Remember, even having a final judgment day is really saying that there's a return of an awakening taking place. And beyond that, that's heavily linked with karma. We even know this in the tarot. Judgment is a highly spiritual awakening card, but it's also the theme of there being strong karma, divine karma being struck down. And that divine karma striking down actually means we have to recalibrate to come into oneness. We have to be able to balance and recalibrate our own karma. This just means things we have done out of unconsciousness. That in and of itself is another way of saying we have to become aware. So even judgment is a parallel concept to revelations. It just comes with heavy consequence if we are not made aware. Judgment there has many different sides to it. In all esoteric topics, in all of reality, there's going to be things we see that are face value. When we see those things at their outermost layer, the most face value layer, that's called the exoteric. But then there's also these deeper meanings, just like an onion has many different layers going deeper into it. All of these different terms of revelations and apocalypse and judgment, they have more than one facet, more than one side to them. One of the beautiful sides of judgment that then gets totally stripped of its nuance and substance when we're looking at it through the most fundamental religious lens is this concept of judgment as an internal reckoning. It is an internal process where we're literally just being seen transparently for how we're vibrating. Judgment, among the other ways I have mentioned it, is also actually a judgment at all on one side of the coin, because what judgment is saying in this level is, as you are right now, meaning what your body, mind, spirit, what your frequency has evolved into, is what will be experienced. So judgment means the second coming because there is a return of an awakening taking place. And that awakening or remembering is when we have entered unity consciousness, also known as Christ consciousness or oneness. And judgment also means you're being measured, calibrated, and deeply seen as you are beyond all your words. You are deeply seen for the truth of your vibration. But what this judgment is calibrating is our frequency service to self or service to all orientation. And then the third layer of judgment is divine karma that balances our body, mind, spirit into God consciousness. So whatever karma we have not rectified, then the universe will show that to us through really intense reflections. And that's also another layer of what judgment would mean in this case. It would mean that something has to have divine intervention strike inside karma because we are not aligning ourselves with our own free will into a higher state of consciousness. I hope this has revealed revelations.